The lighter flicked once. Julian Frost did not even look at me when he held the flame to the corner of my contract. 16 years of my life curled into black ash right there on his heavy mahogany desk. The paper twisted, blackened, and disintegrated while he leaned back in his leather chair, as if he had just taken out the morning trash. "You are a costly mistake, Daniel," he said, brushing the charred remnants into his awas basket. "We are cutting the dead weight." I stood there, my employee badge still clipped to my suit jacket, watching the gray smoke spiral toward his recessed ceiling lights. My hands did not shake, my voice did not crack. I just nodded once and walked out of his corner office without saying a single word. That contract burning was not spontaneous. It was the grand finale of a meeting that had started 30 minutes earlier in that same office. Julian had called me in at 4:30 on a Wednesday afternoon. There was no warning, no agenda, just a brief email from his assistant stating that the chief executive officer needed to see me immediately. I had been in the middle of reviewing maintenance schedules for Unit 12, but I closed my laptop and headed upstairs. His office was all glass and dark wood, the kind of space designed to intimidate. He was standing at the window when I walked in, looking out over the parking lot as if he were surveying his kingdom. "Daniel, sit," he said. I sat. He turned around holding a folder. "I have been reviewing departmental expenses," he began, his tone cold and detached. "Your salary is significantly above market rate for your position." I looked at him, keeping my expression neutral. "My position is Grid Infrastructure Manager for 35 power distribution units across 7 states. Your position," he said, flipping open the folder, "is basically systems monitoring. We are paying you like you are irreplaceable when the reality is that most of what you do could be automated or outsourced." Something cold settled in my stomach. "Have you reviewed what the grid management system actually does?" I asked. "I do not need to review it," he replied with arrogance. "I need to reduce payroll by 15%, and you are the biggest line item in your department." He pulled out my contract, the one I had signed 16 years ago, with his father. "Effective immediately, we are terminating your employment." "You are firing me," I said. "We are restructuring," he answered. "Your role is redundant." That was the moment I should have said something. I should have explained that the system he thought was so easily automated did not come with the building. I should have told him exactly what he was about to lose. But I was too stunned, too blindsided, and part of me wanted to see how far his ignorance would take him. "I will need that termination in writing," I said. That was when he pulled out his lighter and burned my contract. 16 years reduced to ash because Julian Frost looked at a spreadsheet and saw an expense instead of the person holding his entire operation together. That was Julian's first mistake. He never asked the right questions. My name is Daniel Vance, and for 16 years, I was the grid infrastructure manager at Frost Energy Solutions. It was not the kind of title that turned heads at social events, but it was the kind that kept the lights on for 35 regional power distribution units across 7 states. Every substation, every relay system, every backup protocol, and every single line of code that made their entire operation run smoothly was my work. Julian Frost had inherited the company from his father, Charles Frost, 8 months ago. The old man understood what I did and respected the infrastructure. But Julian, who had spent his career doing venture capital and technology startups, only saw numbers. He saw my paycheck and decided it was too high for someone who basically did systems monitoring. He thought I was some security guard watching screens instead of the engineer who designed, built, and maintained the entire proprietary system his company ran on. What Julian did not know was that the grid management software, the automated response protocols that prevented blackouts, and the predictive maintenance algorithms that saved the company millions of dollars every year were created by me on my own time. I had built them using my own resources before Frost Energy even knew they needed them. When Charles Frost hired me 16 years ago, I was fresh out of graduate school with a master's degree in electrical engineering and a head full of ideas about smart grid technology. The company was mid-sized then, operating only 12 distribution units with outdated manual systems. Charles gave me a job as a junior technician, and I gave him a technological revolution. I spent my nights and weekends building the framework for what would become the Vance Grid Intelligence System. I did not use company equipment. I used my own computer and my own servers that I had set up in my apartment's spare bedroom. When I finally showed Charles what I had developed, he was blown away. We made a handshake agreement that I have regretted not putting in writing ever since. I would implement my system across his operations, and he would compensate me fairly. I kept the intellectual property rights, and he got exclusive use as long as I was employed there. That deal worked for 15.5 years. Charles treated me right, paid me well, and respected my expertise. The company grew from 12 units to 35, expanding across the entire Midwest and into the South. Then Charles passed away, and Julian decided to optimize operations. I was optimization target number 1. The morning after Julian Frost burned my contract, I woke up at 5:30 like I always did. My wife Clara was already up, pouring hot coffee in our kitchen. She had been a high school history teacher for 14 years and possessed a unique gift for seeing patterns in human conflict that I often missed. "You are smiling," Clara said, handing me a mug. "That is either really good or really bad." "I got fired yesterday," I said, taking a slow sip. Her eyes went wide and then she smiled. "You are smiling because Julian Frost just made the most expensive mistake of his life and he does not even know it yet." Our son Toby shuffled into the kitchen, still in his pajamas, his backpack already loaded for school. He was 8 years old and had inherited my methodical nature and Clara's warmth. "Does that mean you can come to my science fair on Thursday?" Toby asked. "It is at 2 o'clock and you always miss it because of work." Something twisted in my chest. He was right. I had missed 3 years of his school events because they always fell during critical grid maintenance windows. "Yes, buddy," I said, kneeling down to hug him. "I will absolutely be there." Toby smiled, grabbed a granola bar, and ran toward the living room, his mind already at ease. Clara sat down across from me at our wooden kitchen table. "So, what happens now?" she asked. "Now we wait about 48 hours, I replied. "For what?" "For Julian to realize that when he terminated my employment, he terminated his access to the entire grid management system. The Vance Grid Intelligence System was independent, proprietary software. When I left the company, my intellectual property left with me. And when that intellectual property happens to be the only thing keeping 35 power distribution units operational across 7 states, my departure creates a cascading system failure. I had built-in safety protocols. I was not a monster. The system could run smoothly for 72 hours without manual intervention. After that, it would require administrative authentication to continue normal operations. Administrative authentication that only I could provide because I was the sole system administrator. Julian would have received his first warning alert around 11 o'clock that morning. It was a simple notification that administrative credentials would be required for system continuation within 60 hours. His IT department probably looked at it, assumed it was routine, and sent a request to my old company email, which had already been deactivated. By that evening, the warnings would be getting more insistent. By the next morning, they would be critical. I spent my first day of freedom doing things I had not done in 16 years. I slept until 8. I took Toby to school myself, instead of rushing off before he caught the bus. I went to the local market with Clara, bought fresh produce, and sat in a quiet coffee shop reading a book. My phone rang 14 times. All calls were from Frost Energy numbers. I did not answer. I had set up a new voicemail message stating that I was no longer employed at the company and could not assist with operations. The emails started around noon on the second day. First, they came from the IT department, confused and polite. Then from regional operations managers, urgent and demanding, and finally from Julian's personal assistant, insisting I contact the office immediately. I deleted each one without reading past the subject line. Clara found me in my home office that afternoon, the spare bedroom where I had built the original system framework. My private servers were still there, humming quietly as they ran backup instances of the software. "They are calling our house phone now," Clara said, leaning against the doorframe. "I told them you had moved to a remote research station to study penguins." I laughed. "You did not." "I absolutely did," she said. The woman on the phone sounded like she was having a panic attack. "What is the status over there?" I pulled up my private monitoring dashboard, which tracked system status across all 35 units. Yellow warning indicators were lit up across the board. They are about 18 hours away from a complete system lockout, I explained. Once that happens, the system locks into safe mode. Everything stays operational for safety, but they lose all the advanced features. No predictive load balancing, no efficiency optimization, and no automated recovery. Their costs will spike, they will have minor local outages, and they will be vulnerable to any supply fluctuations. It is uncomfortable for the company, but safe for the public. To get full functionality back, they need my administrator keys. And now they are going to have to negotiate with me instead of just burning my contract and walking away. That night at 11:47, I was still sitting in my office. Clara stood behind my chair watching the countdown timer on my screen show 8 minutes until the 72-hour window expired. 7 minutes, 6, 5. My hand hovered over the keyboard. 6 keystrokes were all it would take to extend the authentication window and keep everything running normally. 6 keystrokes, and Julian Frost would never face the consequences of what he had done. 3 minutes, 2, 1. The screen flickered. Unit 1 switched to safe mode, then Unit 2, then 3, 4, 5. Within 40 seconds, all 35 units turned from green to yellow. Safe mode was active. Full functionality was locked. I sat back and let out a deep breath. "It is done," I said. "How do you feel?" Clara asked, squeezing my shoulders. "Terrified, powerful, and vindicated all at once," I whispered. Clara kissed the top of my head. "Come to bed. Tomorrow is going to be intense." Day 3 arrived with the loud ringing of our doorbell at 6:15 in the morning. Someone was pressing the button repeatedly, refusing to stop. Clara stumbled out of bed looking ready to fight. I pulled on a robe and headed downstairs. Through the peephole, I saw a man in a rumpled, expensive suit, his face red and sweating in the cool morning air. It was not Julian, but I recognized him immediately. It was Todd Fleming, the chief operating officer of Frost Energy. I opened the door but left the security chain locked in place. "Can I help you, Todd?" I asked. "Daniel, thank God," Todd gasped. "We need you to come to the office right now. The entire grid system is locked up. We have critical warnings across all 35 units. We need administrative access immediately." "I do not work for Frost Energy anymore," I replied calmly. "You will need to contact your IT department." "Our IT department cannot access the system," Todd said, his voice rising in panic. "You are the only one with the credentials." "Sounds like a problem for your current employees," I said. "I am not one of them." Todd's jaw clenched. "Daniel, be reasonable. We are willing to discuss terms for bringing you back. All communication needs to go through my attorney, Diane Whitman," I told him. "Have a good morning." I closed the door and locked it. My hands were shaking from the pure adrenaline. Clara had come downstairs and was watching from the landing. "That was cold," she said, smiling. "It was necessary," I replied. Toby appeared at the top of the stairs, rubbing his eyes. "Why is everyone waking up so early?" he asked. "Just some people from my old job who forgot I do not work there anymore," I said, walking up to carry him back to bed. The morning fog was still thick outside as I walked Toby to his elementary school. We held hands, and he talked excitedly about his upcoming science project on magnets. I listened closely, realizing how many of these simple, quiet mornings I had sacrificed to a company that valued me so little. Later that morning, after dropping Toby off, my phone buzzed with calls from regional operations managers. When I finally answered one, the manager sounded desperate, explaining that Unit 14 was experiencing voltage fluctuations, and they did not know how to manually balance the load without my automated dashboard. I calmly told him that since I was no longer an employee, I was legally forbidden from accessing or advising on their active systems. Around mid-morning, I checked my professional social network. Frost Energy Solutions had posted 3 new job listings, all marked as urgent hires. They were looking for a senior grid infrastructure engineer, an emergency systems administrator, and a chief technical officer for energy operations. The salary ranges they offered were between $180,000 and $220,000, almost double what they had been paying me. The job descriptions were frantic, filled with technical terms they clearly did not comprehend. I took screenshots of the listings for my records. Then I saw Julian's profile. He had posted an update stating that Frost Energy was seeking immediate partnerships with enterprise grid management solution providers. He was trying to replace my entire system in less than 72 hours. My phone buzzed again. It was an unknown number with a local area code. I answered out of curiosity. "Hello, Mr. Vance," a woman said. "This is Angela Hart from Grid Tech Solutions. I apologize for the cold call, but we received an urgent request for proposal from Frost Energy this morning, asking us to quote a complete grid management system replacement. Your name came up as the creator of their current infrastructure." I kept my voice professional. "I appreciate the call, Angela, but I cannot discuss Frost Energy's systems." "I understand," she said. "I just wanted to give you a courtesy heads up. Their requested timeline is 30 days, which is impossible. A realistic timeline for a system of that scale would be 18 to 24 months, and the cost would be between $15 million and $20 million for a turnkey solution." My hands started shaking again. "We will probably decline the proposal," Angela continued. "But I wanted to reach out because if you are ever interested in consulting work, Grid Tech would love to talk to you. Anyone who built what you built is someone we want on our team." "Thank you, Angela," I said. "I will keep that in mind." After I hung up, I sat in my car, staring at the grocery store parking lot. Julian was trying to replace me with a $20 million enterprise solution that would take 2 years to implement, and he had called me a costly mistake. That afternoon, I contacted Diane Whitman. She had handled our home purchase and had excellent connections to intellectual property specialists. She called me back within an hour, and I spent 40 minutes explaining the system, the handshake agreement with Charles, Julian's actions, and the lockout. Diane laughed when I finished. "Daniel, this is beautiful," she said. "Do you have documentation?" "I have everything," I replied. "Timestamped development logs, emails with Charles, server records, and the software copyright registration I filed 8 years ago. I even have a video of our handshake agreement." Charles suggested it. We recorded a conversation laying out the terms. I kept my ownership, and he got exclusive use during my employment. Diane sounded thrilled. "I am going to loop in my colleague Walter Penn," she said. "He specializes in intellectual property law. Do not respond to any communication from Frost Energy. Let everything go through us. Get ready, Daniel, because this is going to get intense." That evening around 8 o'clock, the doorbell rang again. It was a steady, patient ring every 30 seconds. Clara went to the door, looked through the peephole, and turned back to me with wide eyes, whispering that Julian Frost was on our porch. My stomach dropped. I joined her at the door, opening it slightly but keeping the security chain attached. Julian stood there, his expensive suit rumpled, his tie loosened, looking nothing like the confident executive who had burned my contract. His face was pale under the yellow porch light, and his voice trembled slightly when he spoke. "Daniel, we need to talk," Julian said. "Any communication needs to go through my attorney," I replied. "Forget the attorney for 1 minute," Julian said, his voice tight. "This is getting out of hand. You have made your point. You are upset about the termination, but you cannot just shut down our entire operation because your feelings are hurt." The condescension in his voice made my blood boil. "My feelings are not hurt, Julian," I said. "My intellectual property rights are being enforced." "Intellectual property?" he sneered. "You developed that system while working for Frost Energy. That makes it company property. I developed that system on my own time using my own equipment before your father. And I agreed on terms," I said. "I have copyright registration, development logs, and video proof of your father acknowledging my ownership. If you want to challenge that, we can go to court." His expression shifted to anger. "You are going to hurt hundreds of employees and thousands of customers over a legal technicality?" "I am not hurting anyone," I replied. "The power is on, and the systems are running in safe mode. You just do not have access to the advanced software you do not own. Hire a lawyer and make me an offer for licensing rights. Otherwise, get off my porch." Julian's face went red. "You are making a huge mistake. I will bury you in legal fees and make sure you never work in this industry again." "Good luck with that," I said. "I already have consulting offers, including one from Grid Tech Solutions, the company you asked to replace my system for $20 million. His face went pale. He had not expected me to know that. "Get off my property, Julian." I closed the door and locked it. The next morning, I met with Diane Whitman and Walter Penn at their downtown office. Walter was in his mid-50s, impeccably dressed, and had the quiet confidence of a lawyer who rarely lost. We sat around a large mahogany table, sipping black coffee as we discussed our strategy. "Daniel, your documentation is airtight," Walter said, opening a thick manila folder. "But as I reviewed Frost Energy's financial records, I found something major. In their investor disclosures, they described the grid management system as proprietary technology owned by the company. That is, securities fraud. They represented to investors that they owned software they actually licensed from you under an employment agreement. Now that the agreement is terminated, they have nothing. They are in direct violation of your exclusive copyright protections under Title 17 of the United States Code, Section 106. Walter slid a folder toward me. "They are facing potential regulatory investigations and investor lawsuits. But that is not all. Late yesterday, Frost Energy's legal counsel sent us a document. They claim you signed a waiver 5 years ago, relinquishing all intellectual property rights to the company in exchange for a $50,000 bonus." I stared at him. "I never signed any such document," I said, shaking my head in disbelief. "I know," Walter said, a cold smile spreading across his face. "We analyzed the document, and the signature is a clear forgery. We checked the date on the document. That week, you were hospitalized in another state with a broken leg after a car accident. You were on heavy pain medication and could not have signed anything at the office. Even worse, our digital forensic specialist analyzed the PDF metadata of the scan they sent us. The document was supposedly created 5 years ago, but the file metadata shows it was generated using an online template just 2 days ago. This is a severe violation of California Penal Code Section 470, which covers forgery. Because the signature was forged, the document is void ab initio, meaning it is legally void from the very beginning. They tried to manufacture evidence to steal your software, and in doing so, they committed a felony." I sat back, stunned by the sheer stupidity of Julian's actions. "What does this mean?" I asked. "It means we have absolute leverage," Walter explained. "They are facing criminal forgery charges, securities fraud investigations, and intellectual property theft. We also have the 15 safety complaints you filed over 3 years, which they ignored, including the fire at Unit 23. We are going to demand a comprehensive settlement. We will require them to remediate all 15 safety violations, pay for a license, and compensate you for back pay. If they refuse, we go to the regulators." Walter drafted the formal demand letter that afternoon, outlining the forgery under California Penal Code Section 470, the void ab initio status of the waiver, the securities fraud, and the safety violations. It was delivered to Julian's office by courier. 2 hours later, Julian's lawyer called to request an immediate settlement meeting for the next morning. The settlement meeting took place in Walter Penn's conference room, a spacious room with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a sweeping view of the city's skyscrapers under a gray morning sky. Julian Frost sat across from me, flanked by Todd Fleming and his lead counsel, Margaret O'Connor. Julian looked exhausted, his tie loosened and his usual arrogance completely gone. Todd kept nervously adjusting his collar, while Julian tapped his fingers rapidly on the table. Margaret opened the discussion, trying to maintain a strong professional front. "We believe the ownership of this grid infrastructure software is still disputable," she began, "but my client is willing to offer a generous settlement to avoid lengthy litigation." Walter Penn smiled calmly and laid out our evidence. He placed the copyright registration, the handshake video, the securities disclosures, and the forged waiver on the table. "We have analyzed the signature on this waiver," Walter said, pointing to the paper. "It is a clear forgery, which constitutes a violation of California Penal Code Section 470. Since the document was forged, it is void ab initio, meaning it is completely void from the beginning. Furthermore, we have documentation showing Daniel was hospitalized in another state during the week of the alleged signature, and the metadata proves the file was created 2 days ago. This is not a civil dispute anymore, Margaret. If we proceed, we will present this evidence to the district attorney and federal regulators." Margaret looked at the forged document, then at Julian, whose face had turned pale. She requested a brief recess and pulled Julian into a private room. 10 minutes later, they returned. Margaret looked defeated. My client is prepared to discuss licensing terms, she said. We want a perpetual license for the software. We will pay $1 million for the license and an additional $300,000 for back pay and compensation. Our total offer is $1,300,000. Walter turned to me, and I nodded. I had one condition. You must remediate all 15 safety violations I documented within 6 months, I said. This must be verified by an independent third party. If you fail to do so, the non-disclosure agreement is voided, and I will report everything to the federal regulators. Julian looked at Todd, who nodded quickly. We agree to the terms, Margaret said. The legal team spent the next 3 hours drafting the final settlement agreement. When I finally signed the documents with a heavy black pen and walked out of the office, I felt an incredible weight lift from my shoulders. My phone buzzed with a notification from my bank. The wire transfer had cleared, showing a balance of $1,300,000. I drove directly to Toby's school, pulled him out of class early, and took him to a quiet ice cream parlor to celebrate. Did you beat the mean guy, Dad? Toby asked, his face covered in chocolate. Yes, buddy, I did, I told him, smiling. We talked about how important it is to stand up for yourself and protect what you build. Over the next 6 months, I watched from a distance as Frost Energy was forced to clean up its operation. The independent safety inspector verified that all 15 violations had been remediated, including the wiring at Unit 23, which now had modern fire suppression systems and thermal monitoring sensors. Julian Frost was quietly removed from his position as chief executive officer by the board of directors, who were furious about the legal exposure, the forgery scandal, and the securities fraud risks. I used my settlement money to establish Vance Grid Solutions, my own consulting firm. I rented a small office downtown and hired 2 talented junior engineers, Elena and Liam, who were eager to help build custom grid management software for mid-size utility companies. Elena was a master of database indexing, and Liam was a networking expert. We set up the new office space with fresh monitors, whiteboards, and a coffee machine, creating a collaborative environment. Our first major client was Ohio Regional Power. I did not use a single line of the software I licensed to Frost Energy, but I used all the new ideas I had spent years designing in my mind. The version 2 system I built for Ohio was faster, more secure, and far more efficient. Within 2 years, my firm had 9 major clients across the country, and we were competing directly with Frost Energy. Julian Frost had called me a costly mistake. He was right, but he was the one who had made the mistake. He thought he could burn my contract, ignore my warnings, and steal my work. Instead, he paid $1,300,000 to license version 1 of my software, while his competitors hired me to build version 3. The grid is still running, but I am finally the one in control.